your executive functioning skills will be tested like no other as a school psychologist. So I think that's important. I think a couple other pieces of advice I would have. One is to get to know everyone in the building as best you can, and don't just focus on teachers and don't just focus on your special education staff. Like, get to know everyone, building manager, front office staff. Those people are extremely important to you in your day-to-day role, and it's critical to get to know them.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Prepared School Psych Podcast. I'm Jenny Ponzert, and today I am welcoming Matthew Moix, who is a respected figure in the field of school psychology and education leadership. With over 2 decades of experience as a school psychologist at the Gilbert Public Schools and serving as the coordinator of psychological services, Matt has demonstrated a commitment to student well-being and academic success. Additionally, he holds the position of instructor at Northern Arizona University, where he shares his expertise with future professionals. He earned his doctorate of philosophy and school psychology from the University of Memphis, following a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Arkansas State University. He is also the president of the Association of Arizona School Psychologists, where he plays a pivotal role in advocating for the enhancement of psychological services in educational settings across the state. I'm very honored to have you here, Matt. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we always kick off with what I think is an important question, especially as we are launching into the summertime. What is your favorite TV show that you are watching right now?
It's actually a little bit of an older one. My middle son and wife and I are watching Suits, which has recently shown up on Netflix. So we're binge watching that. We've made it through several seasons. Really enjoying it.
Well, so you're watching The Princess right before she became the princess. Exactly. All right.
Exactly.
Well, in one sentence, how do you think your colleagues describe you as a school psychologist?
One sentence is tough. I think they generally describe me as humorous and effective and using my humor to defuse tense situations and helpful to teams and colleagues.
I love that. I love that. Well, as I shared in your intro, you've been in this field for quite a while now. At what point in your journey did you become involved in your state association?
It was actually really early on. I had a good friend of mine who we worked in the same district for 20 years before she moved a little bit further north in the valley and now works for a different district. But she was involved with the Arizona Association of School Psychologists and reached out to me to see if I would be interested in running for secretary at the time. So I was only probably 3 years into my career when I first started that. And so it just kind of grew from there. But yeah, really early on, got involved, started with stuff like writing articles for the newsletter or some basic behind the scenes kind of work. But then she was like, I think you could be, good at the leadership level. So that's how I got started.
It's usually someone who just asks us, right? And I will say that's how I got involved in mine as well. I remember someone asking me to just be a part of the board. And then I remember when they asked me about running for president. And I remember for myself, my first response back was, I don't want to give the big speech. Like, I don't mind being the leader, but I don't want to give the big speech at the
Right.
And he was like,
Right.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. That's not the big thing. And I'm like, that is the first thing I'm thinking about here.
And honestly, it's what so many people think about when they think of the president is they're the person that has to get up and give the speech at the conference. And it is nerve wracking. Even if you've done it before, done it a couple of times, public speaking in front of that many people can absolutely be stressful. And I do remember that conversation the first time I ran for president. I was like, I don't want to do that at all, but you get through it.
I find it interesting because school psychologists lead so many conversations at the IEP table, but you ask them to speak in front of their colleagues, and it's a different experience, definitely.
Absolutely. Many of us will do professional development, whether it's for teachers, for whole staff and faculty at a school, and not even think twice about it. But if you ask a school psychologist to stand up, even in front of the spikes in their own department, they immediately like, no, I'll do training for 1,000 teachers, but don't put me in front of 35, 40 school psychologists. I don't want to do.
I understand that. I will have to say too, during my speech, my dad was sitting in one of the front rows recording me the whole time too. So no pressure at all. No pressure
none
at
at
all
all.
on that one.
None at all.
Well, as a state association leader, what have been some of your key initiatives? What are you passionate about working on?
It's interesting. We just finished our annual retreat where we get our whole leadership team together, and we do it in Flagstaff, Arizona, so it's up north and a little bit out of the heat. But we just finished that a couple weeks ago where we get together and plan out for the whole year. We do our strategic planning about activities and everything we want to do. And we always try to align our activities and our goals to NAS strategic goals regarding the practice model, the shortage of school psychologists, social justice. But a lot of our activities involve professional development, of course, but we always try to do things that we think support school psychologists in the state and provide them with leadership and education and support that are beneficial to them. So the things we've really planned on doing next year, we're working on a lot of really big professional development opportunities that we're going to try to do some stuff nationwide that we think will be beneficial in a virtual format, obviously. That'll be good. We've done a lot with our Department of Education in terms of, I'm serving on a committee to work on revising and improving our special education evaluation process, the code basically that we have to follow in terms of timelines, procedures, and that sort of stuff. And then some of our board members have been very involved working again with the Department of Education and others around the state on school safety is a big topic that we're obviously really passionate about and think school psychologists play a big role in that.
That's incredible. I'm curious for other people who are listening to this, is that something that your team was invited to participate in, or was that something that you had to raise your hand and kind of share, we might be good to be sitting around this table with all of you as well?
It's interesting. Over the years, that has kind of changed. There were times where we had to really raise our hand and maybe knock on doors or kick and scream to get invited to participate in things. And we were left out in the cold quite a bit. And so over the years, a couple of things have changed. One, our association was able to secure enough funding to hire, we call it a public policy liaison, to help basically get some inroads with the Department of Education as well as the policymakers of the state, whether it's legislators or other key members of various groups. And so helping make those connections really started that process. And then once our association was involved in even just the first few things, they realized we do, as school psychologists, have a lot to offer. So we started getting invited to other things. And so the school safety, one of our past presidents, our immediate past president, Stacey Anderson, and our Department of Education liaison, Jennifer Ostrom, are fantastic at really making inroads and talking about school safety and the importance of CSTAG training and prepare training. And so they do a lot of work with that. And they're doing a lot of planning and activities and really sorts of workshops, presentations, everything around that. Special Education Evaluation Subcommittee I mentioned on with our State Board of Education, and they reached out looking for a school psychologist that could represent the practitioner level and try to help navigate some of those difficult conversations because there's a lot of different people represented around that table, whether parent, advocate, as well as special education personnel.
That's wonderful. I mean, I know so many people at our own school site struggle to figure out what we do, right? And that we're not the school counselor. And so I can imagine that person, your liaison, was really helpful in first just explaining what it is that we do and therefore why we deserve that seat around the table and why we would bring value to that table as well.
A lot of our initial activity with that public policy liaison involved just meeting legislators and explaining who school psychologists are, what some of the things we do. Some of them that were familiar with school psychology just thought we just tested kids and that's all we did. Others thought we were school counselors. So despite us making those inroads, we still have a ways to go. We were part of a grant for school safety. School psychologists were supposed to be included at the state legislature level. Politics got in the way and we got removed. We're going to try again. But the sort of amusing part of it was one of the legislators was talking about the benefits of having school psychologists included in this grant, kept referring to school psychiatrists. So we still have a little bit of work to do, but again, at least they were advocating for us.
Right.
The main thing.
That's a thank you. And by the way, that's not quite what we do. Well, what is an accomplishment in this role that you are most proud of?
Honestly, it was, I think every not every state association, but many state associations are similar to the Arizona Association of School Psychologists, and that the president, one of their primary responsibilities is to plan and put on a conference. And I think it's pretty stressful for every president to make sure that we have enough people show up, that we make enough money, that we don't go bankrupt. And fortunately, we had a great fall conference this year, past October or November. So I was really proud of that. I thought that was really great. And I'm really proud of the ongoing work we're doing with that special education evaluation. But that could be potentially challenging in terms of some of the things that advocates and parents are asking for in terms of shortening evaluation timeline and really trying to go above and beyond. And I know where they're coming from. They're trying to support parents and families, but I feel like my job and some of my colleagues on the committee are really trying to educate them about the shortage of school psychologists and the realities that we're facing.
Right.
So when they talk about shortening evaluation timelines, that's going to create some real world problem. And so I think I'm pretty proud that we've been able, thus far anyway, to try to come to some sort of consensus and compromise in some of the areas we've talked about.
Well, reflecting back to when you were a first-year school psychologist, what advice would you give to someone who maybe has recently graduated and is starting out in this field?
That was a long time ago, as you alluded to, with my wealth of experience. The obvious ones are obviously organization, staying on top of timelines, figuring out what works for you in terms of systems, whether it's spreadsheets, whether it's calendaring. Some of those things are the basics. You've got to have those down so you stay on top of things, you don't fall behind. Your executive functioning skills will be tested like no other as a school psychologist. So I think that's important. I think a couple other pieces of advice I would have. One is to get to know everyone in the building as best you can, and don't just focus on teachers and don't just focus on your special education staff. Like, get to know everyone, building manager, front office staff. Those people are extremely important to you in your day-to-day role, and it's critical to get to know them. But honestly, as someone coming into the field now, the advice I would give them is learn as much as they possibly can about behavior and challenging behavior and how to intervene, not just with an individual student, but helping teachers with classroom management. So many teachers now are undertrained or have less experience than in years past just because of the turnover. So they need basic skills on how to manage a classroom and how to help control some of the behavioral challenges we're seeing an increase.
Well, and I know we have a lot of people listening who are interested in leadership as well. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's kind of interested in getting into some leadership roles, whether it's like a senior school psychologist or getting involved in their state association?
If they're looking at getting involved in their state association, don't think that you have to run for an office to be involved in leadership. There are, without a doubt, no matter what state you're in, there are committees and subcommittees, task forces for your state association that you can call up the president, you can call up one of your regional directors, whatever, that's what we call them. But you can call up those guys and say, how can I get involved? How can I help? They're likely on a website description of what the various committees do. So if any of those sound interesting, call up and say, what task can I help with? I think there's a lot of people out there who want to be involved and who want to help, want to assist the profession, but need to be told, like, here's what we need right now. It may be as simple as help us develop a one-page document that we can give to legislators on a position statement on what school psychologists feel about this specific issue. We've got a lot of people working with our state association in terms of the volunteer leaders, but we can't do it all. So if you want to get started, that's a nice way to get your foot in the door. You don't have to run for president off the bat. That's probably not how you want to get your start, but that's not. The advice I would give anyone wanting to get involved in leadership in their district is kind of the same thing. Like, there are likely committees within your department if it's big enough. In Gilbert, we have 45 school psychologists, so it's a decent sized department. And we've got various committees on everything from a social committee to recruitment to our professional development committee. Get involved with one of those, help lead those, help plan the activities for that little group. And that's very beneficial. And eventually the big leadership positions will come open and you can apply for those.
Well, you had mentioned about school psychologists needing really good executive functioning skills, right? A lot of people want to get more involved, but it is that time commitment. You got a lot of things going on. So how do you manage all of your time and make things work?
My wife would say probably not as well as I should. My boss may say the same thing. No, it is challenging. It's not like I get my job done and the leadership for an ASP done in my 8 to 5 job, right? I work in the evening sometimes, either for my actual job or for my volunteer job. And so sometimes it does take some extra time commitment, but I think what's beneficial, or what has been beneficial to me, is trying to kind of compartmentalize and set aside specific times to work on specific things. So, we all have a list of meetings we have every day on our calendars, right? So between those, can work on different kinds of things. So I'll set aside time to work on stuff for my district. And in the evenings, I can focus on doing stuff for the state association, whether it's writing the president's address for the newsletter that is monthly, but seems like it's weekly, or whether it's planning our board retreat and those kinds of things. But you have to be able to use that time during the day to take care of your job responsibilities, so you're not having to do those at night and then winding up working really late into the night on your state association, because something will give eventually, whether it's your health, the state association, or your job. So you need to try to prioritize what it is and how to work through it.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share or promote about the association in Arizona?
Sure. So like I said, we're trying to work with Dr. Byron McClure on a virtual workshop around artificial intelligence and the use of AI in school psychology. That's still in the planning stages, but we're looking at early fall for that. So I would say people follow us on social media, because we'll be promoting it. So many of your listeners, I'm sure, follow Byron already, so he'll be promoting it as well. But we're looking forward to that. So that's really good. And then obviously our fall conference, we switched after COVID. We switched to a hybrid model. So we've got in-person sessions, but we also have some that are simulcast and live streamed. So anyone in the country can sign up to attend our fall conference virtually. And we'll be putting that out on social media as well. You can find it on Facebook and Instagram. And you obviously go to our website at asp-az.org for any update.
And we'll make sure to put all of those links into the show notes, so anyone listening who wants to follow and just keep up to date. It is so nice. I think if we learned anything from COVID, is that these virtual training options have really widened the opportunities for school psychologists in all 50 of our states to be able to really determine, like, what are those areas that I myself want to do a deep dive into. And if my state doesn't have it, does another state have it? And
Right.
it's such a wonderful opportunity.
It really is. And I think a lot of states have joined in on that. They've figured out we don't have to just target our state. We can broadcast it nationwide, not just as a money-making endeavor, but to broaden options for people around the country. And I think it's a great opportunity. Honestly, not that I wish COVID had happened at all, but I wish it had happened when I was a little younger in my days, because I really struggle with the online virtual workshops, to be perfectly honest, to pay attention. But I'm getting better at it, even at my advanced age. But I think a lot of people, it's just second nature. Those technology natives, as they say, really have no trouble at all. They'd rather attend a virtual training. And I think it's beneficial. And our association has done a great job at capitalizing on that, and being able to offer both options is nice and valuable.
And I think it's so nice because we are able to record everything as well. There was a 2-day conference going on right now that I signed up for, that I knew signing up for it that I had no intention to attend anything live, but I knew that the replays would be available for a time. That is something I could easily do at another time. So again, I think there's all these wonderful opportunities that, yeah, you and I 20 some odd years ago didn't have those opportunities. So it is lovely. Well, this podcast is called The Prepared School Psychologist. When you think of that term prepared, what do you do to help yourself feel more prepared in your role?
I was thinking about the title of your podcast, Prepared School Psychologist, and being prepared as a school psychologist when I worked in a building was very different than what I have to do to prepare, like, my day-to-day now. So being prepared in a building involved making sure that I had everything I needed for the meetings throughout the day. Like, our lives revolved around meetings, right? You have a
Right.
meeting in the morning, then you test a kid, and then you go deal with the crisis, and you got another meeting. But you have to be prepared for those meetings, because your day is going to get away from you. So if you show up on Wednesday morning and you got a meeting Wednesday afternoon, and you think, oh, I'll type up that report or I'll finish that during the day, that's not going to happen. And so what I try to tell the school psychologists that I supervise is, as hard as it is, the more you can work ahead, the better off you're going to be. And I know timelines get rushed, and there is always something going on, multiple things going on. But I think working a little bit ahead helps with that. Similarly, in my current role, it's all a matter of making sure I'm checking out my calendar days, weeks in advance, and making sure nothing sneaks up on me, because there's always a project dumped on you, whether it's school psychologist, whether it's coordinator of psychological services, something gets dumped on you at the last minute and you've got to solve it. But the other thing I do, regardless of what my job is I try to take care of myself mentally and physically. So I run, I hike, I do a lot of physical activity, because if I don't, I get stressed and I get weirded out, and then I get bad things start happening in my head. So it's just easier to manage the stress if I run. And I have a friend that I run with, and we call it therapy. It's cheaper than a school psychologist, honestly, or a licensed psychologist. We just talk to each other about what's going on, and that really helps. So
Many years ago, when I was preparing for a marathon, had a running partner who was a school psychologist, and I was her previous supervisor. So we had this thing where while we were running, because she was a better runner than me, while we were running, she would tell me about her situation, and then we would do walk breaks. And then while we were walking, I would give her my response. But there was no way that I could talk and run at the same time. So it worked out really well.
I've been running for quite a while, and as I've gotten older, the walk breaks have become a lot more frequent. I will even tell my friend that I'm running with, like, we'll be running, and at the next walk break, I'll share a story with. That's about all I can get out right now.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all this wonderful information with our listeners.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. All right. So I hope everyone found today's episode of the Prepared School Psych podcast informative. Remember, your expertise plays a vital role in advocating for student achievement and growth. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment and review us on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more school psychologists like you. Thank you for listening and have a great day. That concludes another episode of the Prepared School Psych podcast. And I hope today's discussion equipped you not just with knowledge, but also the confidence to take action. Remember, every conversation we have and every resource we share builds a bridge towards a more inclusive and empowering learning landscape for our students. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insightful conversations and resources to support your journey. Share this podcast with colleagues. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder, everyone, the information and advice provided in this podcast are for guidance purposes only, and all listeners are required to follow both federal and state law and their own school district guidelines and policies. Thank you.